Hey guys, today we are doing day 13 of Glory Be, which is chapters 23, 24, and 25. So, last time when we left off, Frankie had come to Glory's house and told her that Laura had stolen something from the pool, and he knows this because she left her black sock there. And Frankie's dad shows up and starts asking about where Laura lives and how her and her family and the freedom workers are trouble. And Glory and her dad and her sister Jesslyn all stand up for her. And, they tell him that she's a good person, that she wouldn't have broken in anything or stolen anything. But we can tell that it's probably not over yet, that Frankie's daddy is not the kind of guy to let things go easily. So today when we're reading, we are thinking about what's going to happen next in the story. And remember, it's only a couple days till Glory's birthday when the pool is supposed to be open and it's her favorite day of the year, 4th of July. And things right now in her town are going really bad where there's a lot of disagreement and a lot of changes happening that some people are really happy about desegregation and about helping people come together and everyone being welcome. But there's still a lot of people like Frankie and his daddy that don't want that. And so it's causing a lot of conflict. So we're going to start on chapter 23 of Glory Be. And we are getting towards the end of this book, which is always the best part. This is the third quadrant, or the fourth quadrant. That's what the sticky note means. That means that at this point, everything's going to kind of start falling into place, and it's going to start ending the story and seeing what happens. So, chapter 23. Excuse me, sorry. For dang sure. I needed to find Laura. The next morning, I crept downstairs before the sun peeked over the tall zinnias blooming along our back fence. I'm at the library, was all I wrote for Emma on my note. Pretty soon, I headed straight down Church Street. When Miss Bloom opened the library's back door, Laura stood next to her. Glory, you're up with the chickens. Did you hear, Miss B? Something bad happened at the pool, I said. Laura had a big stack of books hugged tight and a worried look on her face. They're blaming it on you, I told her. Frankie's daddy came to my house last night. We know about the incident, Miss Bloom said. She took off her glasses and put her arm around Laura. Laura had nothing to do with it. Everything's fine. That's not what Mr. Smith said. I stuffed my hand in the pocket of my shorts. He scared me. I told him you didn't do anything. My daddy stuck up for me, too. You and your father are right, Laura finally said. I didn't break into your pool. Your friend Frankie and his father are wrong. Mrs. Bloom said, Mr. Smith's just stirring up trouble. Laura was with me the night someone vandalized the pool. She and her mother and I were having supper together. I told the police that when they were here yesterday evening. Laura looked down at her stack of books and then back at me. I'm going back to Ohio to stay with my grandparents. They're worried. They've heard bad things might happen here. Miss Bloom patted Laura's shoulder. But you're here for July 4th, and we're planning something special at the library next week. Right, Laura? A thank you for everyone who helps with the July 4th parade, Miss B said. Miss Bloom says we'll help with that, Laura said to me. Something special indeed. This is an important week for Hanging Moss. Miss Bloom's eyes squinched up and a huge smile broke out. The parade, the fireworks, and a big to-do at the library. Won't that be fun, girls? Laura bit her lip, like she was deciding about that. The library party sounds like fun. I'm not sure about July 4th, I said under my breath. Miss Bloom touched my hand and looked back at Laura. You'll enjoy the parade, all the floats. Bands are coming from all around, and there will be beautiful fireworks after dark. We'll all go together. You'll be fine with me, dear. Yeah, and the 4th of July, the day after tomorrow, was also my birthday. Nobody cared about that, that's for dang sure. I don't know, Miss B. The pool closing, Frankie accusing Laura of something she didn't do, Mr. Smith yelling at my daddy. I shivered in the air-conditioned library office. I hoped this parade would have been the best ever floats and band. But the way things were going so far this summer, I didn't want to think about what else bad might happen. I've never been to a parade, Laura said. It might be fun. I bet Laura won't think sitting on scratchy grass in the summer heat with a bunch of strangers singing and waving little flags is as much fun as spending her summer finding shells at the beach, like her mama had promised her. But Miss Bloom smiled again, like all of this celebrating was getting better and better. Chapter 24, Patches. So we know that it's 3 days till Lori's birthday. Well, 2 days. The day after tomorrow was her birthday and 4th of July. And she still feels like things are not right. Like that things aren't the way that they've always been. There's a lot of changes. It's causing a lot of upset. And she feels like nobody cares about her birthday. And that's really been upsetting her this whole book. But now that's getting closer and there's more bad things that have been happening. She thinks, well, this parade sounds great, but I feel like something bad's going to happen. And it's called foreshadowing, when the author says, I just couldn't help but think what was going to happen next. Or when they make you think, oh man, I wonder if something bad's going to happen. It's called foreshadowing, where they're trying to get you to think about what could happen next because of what they're saying right now. So it's kind of like a little hint about what might happen next in the book. So chapter 24, Patches. It was finally my birthday, July 4th. I sat with Emma at the kitchen table mixing lemonade and cherry punch, what Frankie calls bug juice. He claimed if you left it outside in the sunshine, bugs would come. But I wasn't bothering with Frankie today. As far as I was concerned, he was a bug, the lowest ant on earth. My friend Laura's going back to Ohio. She doesn't like hanging moss much, I told Emma. I propped my head on one hand and drew invisible circles on the kitchen table with the other. I don't want to go to this stupid picnic. The pool's closed. Frankie's a liar. Jesslyn would rather be with her stuck-up pep squad friends, and Mr. Smith is mad at Daddy. This is beginning to feel like the worst birthday of my entire life. Emma pulled the chair closer to me. Want Emma to tell you a good thing that happening for 4th of July? A special secret? I stirred the bug juice, not sure I needed another secret. You mean somebody cares about our country's independence after all? We've got a big visitor coming to my church, Emma sat up like she was making an important announcement. You mean like Elvis or the Beatles? That big? I scooched my chair closer. Emma laughed. Bigger. She took my hand and held it next to hers. Mr. Robert F. Kennedy is coming to visit, she said, looking right into my eyes. Who's that? I asked her. The most famous man in our government. He's the baby brother of President Kennedy. God rest his soul, Emma leaned in. He's preaching about the new law that just passed. Everybody's going to be treated the same. I'll be able to vote just like your daddy and Mr. Smith. No more white and colored drinking fountains. Everybody can eat wherever they want to. Things are changing, Lori, and Mr. Kennedy's coming to prove it. So that's a huge event. So the president, or the former president of the United States at this time, President Kennedy, his younger brother, is coming to Hanging Moss, which is a huge deal that he's coming to this small town, to the church, to preach about the new law. And the new law is that they can't segregate people anymore. So they can't have a white fountain and a colored fountain, or white chairs at a table and colored chairs at a restaurant or something. That everybody's the same. They can sit where they want. They can sit with whoever they want to. And that's a big deal. And you can tell throughout the story that there's been talk of all of this change, and that's why some people are trying to close things down, like the pool, because they don't want people to be all welcome together. And then there's other people like Laura and her mother that are coming from up north that are coming down to try and help Black people get their rights to vote and their rights to be able to do things so that it would become more equal. And so that's a really big event. So on a piece of paper that you've got, so remember that this is day 13. And see, Robert F. Kennedy is coming to preach at Emma's church about the new laws, or the new desegregation laws. We know that segregation means when people are separated based on their race. So desegregation is the opposite of that. So they're unsegregating people. They're saying that you cannot segregate people anymore, and it's a law now. So now people don't have the choice of saying who is welcome and who is not. It's law now that everybody has to be welcome, and that's a really big event. Before I could ask Emma one more thing about this famous brother of President Kennedy's, we had heard a noise. It sounded like the ceiling was coming down. Now, what's your sister up to? Emma shook her head and started up the stairs. I followed her. Jessalyn was in Mama's old sewing room, cramming shirts and sweaters into the little chest in the corner. What are you doing? I asked her. Moving to my new room. She slammed another drawer shut. Daddy said I could. You plan on sleeping there? Emma nodded towards the little bed in the corner. Room's too tiny for you and all your belongings. You'd be happier staying put with your sister, like you have done since the day she was born. I need my privacy. Jessalyn pressed her lips together. I'm going to high school soon, she said. Like that explained everything. She stuffed one more skirt into her new closet before she prissed off down the stairs. Shoot, let Jessalyn sleep in the sewing room. I'd have more space for my books and my China horse collection, and my baseball cards. But then I thought about that summer, the summer before that, and almost every summer I could remember. How we'd get under the covers and tell ghost stories with our flashlights on. All those nights we stayed up late playing junk poker and sharing secrets. I thought about how Jessalyn acted proud when she'd heard about my letter to the newspaper. How she'd held my hand when I spoke up to Mr. Smith. It seemed like she'd already forgotten about that night on the front porch. I looked over at the sewing machine closed up in the black case, pushed off to the corner with Jessalyn's movie magazine stacked up next to it. I touched the edge of my quilt covering the bed by the window. With Jessalyn's clothes piled on top, I couldn't hardly see the quilt's pattern. I knew the squares by heart, though. Years ago when I was little and Emma was first piecing the quilt together, I'd listen to her singing in time with the wiring sewing machine. The Wittering sewing machine. I moved Jessalyn's Pep Squad jacket, sat down on the bed, and touched my quilt. One tiny piece of the baby blanket I dragged all over the house when I was crawling. One piece from my black cat Halloween costume. One from my green shorts from Lake Whippoorwill, Girl Scout day camp last summer. One scrap of my very first doll's baby dress. The quilt was filled up with my life, and now it seems like the patches of my life were mixing into a new pattern. So our next big event is that Jessalyn moves into the sewing room, which she had talked about wanting to do kind of throughout the book and earlier in the book, how she wanted her own space because she's older and she feels like she's kind of outgrown sharing a room with Glory and the things they used to do together. But now that she's actually moving, Glory says that it seems like she's forgotten about all of their bonds, and even a couple nights ago when Jessalyn stuck up for her. And so it's making her feel like her whole life is changing. It says at the bottom, now it seemed like the patches of my life were mixing into a new pattern. So what had been her pattern for how she was living before, it seems like everything is changing all at once. So our next big important event is that Jessalyn moves out of her and Glory's room into the sewing room. And Glory feels like her whole life is changing. So these are our next two big important events that have happened so far. Jessalyn moves out of her and Glory's room into the sewing room, and all of these changes make Glory feel like her whole life is changing. This is the last chapter we're going to read together for day 13. And then after that, you will fill out your Google form. Chapter 25, Black and Blue and Ugly. By late that afternoon, I said goodbye to Emma and headed out the door, lugging the picnic basket, the bug juice, and a blanket. I walked straight to the pool and stood next to the metal fence, looking one more time at that close sign. Mr. Smith and his stupid committee had won. Nobody was jumping in the community pool today. I felt like I was drowning in a freezing cold pool of disappointment and confusion. Just like swimming the backstroke when it shoots smelly chlorine into every opening on my face and sets me to spitting water, making it hard for me to get a good breath. Outside the gate, a clown tied balloons to baby strollers. A boy was riding his bike decorated with red, white, and blue streamers wheeled by. Almost knocked me down. From over on the library lawn, drums and trumpets turned up for the parade. Dottie Ann Morgan, the Hanging Moss High School homecoming queen, waved from the back of a red convertible, wearing a tiara over her beehive hairdo. I didn't wave back. She kept smiling, but she was scratching at the place where her roughly dress's poof skirt must have been itching the daylights out of her. Some little kid dropped his cotton candy in the dirt and started bawling for his mama. A bee buzzed around my head and finally landed in my juice pitcher. Well, at least he had a pool to swim in. My bug juice suited him just fine. I dropped my blanket on the ground and slumped down on it, and I looked for Laura. Miss Bloom was the first to spot me. "Hello, Glory. You picked the perfect place. Not too far from the library and not too close to the bandstand." She had a camera strapped around one waist and her picnic basket balanced on the other. She spread her blanket a little ways from mine and waved to Uncle Sam, walking by on tall stilts. Pretty soon Laura and her mother showed up, and Miss Bloom smiled like the world was one big happy picnic. When I heard some girls calling out, "Over here, Jessie," I turned around. Jesslyn walked towards her pep squad friends. "They changed her name to Jessie?" "In a minute," she told them. She pranced herself next to me, plunking onto my picnic basket. Robbie came to sit with us. He and Jesslyn and Laura passed around Emma sandwiches and brownies, and I couldn't hardly believe how happy I was. "Scoot over here, Glory," my sister said, patting the space closest to her. She pulled something from her pocket and handed it to me. My big sister had remembered my birthday. I opened the box. Jesslyn told me what she'd gotten me before I could even get a good look. "It's a charm bracelet, Glory, just like mine." She held up her hand and jingled her own bracelet. "You can collect charms from places you visit and things you like." Jesslyn clasped the bracelet around my wrist. I rubbed a tiny silver guitar dangling from the chain. When I looked up at her, it finally felt like I was 12 years old. "Thanks, Jesslyn," I said. So, next event is Jesslyn gives Glory a charm bracelet for her birthday. At first, the guitar was for the Beatles. For that John Lennon Beatle you and Laura are always talking about. She turned the charm towards me. "But now it's for Tupelo," she whispered. The backs of my ears went warm with happiness. Robbie put his closed-up hand out to me. "For you," he said. He dropped something into my lap. A keychain with a picture of Elvis on one side and "Love Me Tender" written on the other. "Thanks, Robbie," is all I can manage. The band was playing "It's a Grand Old Flag." All of Hanging Moss waved their little American flags in the hot, yellow sunshine and sang along. Then that snake Frankie showed up. I had nothing to sing about now. This day was not grand, and there was nothing worth waving at. I walked straight over to Frankie and leaned against a pecan tree, and I glared at him. He said, "Everything's wrong this summer." Frankie looked worried about something. There was a question in his eyes and the start of what looked to me like tears. "Why don't those troublemakers from Ohio just go back to where they belong?" I didn't care that Frankie was on the edge of crying. I got right up in his face. "Laura is going back to Ohio. She's leaving. After people," I looked hard at Frankie when I said that, "accused her of breaking into the pool lockers. She's going home." He kept his eyes on his lanyard whistle. "That's good, then. Good that she's leaving." But he didn't look happy about it. He looked upset. And then he blurted, "I wish that jailbird Robbie would go back to where he belongs. I wish my brother would stop yelling about everything happening this summer." I leaned in closer to Frankie and put a firm grip on his arm. Did you tell anybody about Robbie? I could hardly talk. The back of my throat was burning so. He yanked away from me and got quiet. The band's drums banged louder. Frankie rubbed at the bruise on his arm that I know for sure came from JT popping him. It was black and blue and ugly. Why are you so scared of your daddy and JT? I asked him. Why don't you stand up for yourself? Frankie started to cry for real then, but I turned and I walked back to my blanket. And that is the end of that chapter. So the last thing in that chapter is Glory sees Frankie at the parade and he says, everything is wrong this summer. All right, I'm going to zoom this out a little bit so y'all can see it. Make sure you have this written down before you do your Google form, before. That way, when you do the Google form and you answer those questions, you have all the answers right here. Because I literally take this paper of notes that I've written that I show you guys in the camera, and that's what I make my questions on. It's usually one question for each of these bullet points. Sometimes I leave some of them out, but it's really important that you write this down with me. That way you can help remember what's happened so far in the story. So after you've watched this video, if you need to pause it right now to write these down, go ahead and then hop onto your Google form and fill in those questions before you press turn in on Google Classroom. I will see you next time.